New year, new you, new EHR? Therapy Notes, the most trusted behavioral health software among mental health professionals, could be just the thing that you're looking for. Designed for group and solo clinicians alike, their comprehensive platform seamlessly combines billing, scheduling, documentation, telehealth, e-prescribe, and more into one easy-to-use software. Use promo code MODERN and try them free for 2 months today. This episode is also brought to you by Buying Time. Since 2007, Buying Time has supported entrepreneurs and therapists on their admin, marketing, and bookkeeping needs, and so much more.
Check out their free Buying Time Systems Inventory Checklist to uncover hidden expenses and optimize spending in your practice at buyingtimellc.com/MTSG.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhelm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our profession, the things that go on with the people in it or joining into it. And this is part of our series around talking with current grad students and doing some check-ins about what the state of grad student education is like in our field and some of the people who are in it. And we are joined today by Iris Wilson-Farley, and she is here to help us to continue on with this conversation. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing about your experience.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So the question that I've come up with for this series is, who are you and why do you want to be a therapist?
On the one hand, so who I am, Iris Wilson-Farley. I am a 54-year-old transgender woman. I have been, over the last 5 years, through a journey of coming out to myself and to others and transitioning. And I suppose the trite answer to your question about why I want to be a therapist is that I have a counselor who has absolutely been instrumental in that process. So it's that sort of, I gained a lot from therapy, and now I want to give back. The more complicated answer, I think, is that I've been in corporate America for 32 years, and there's always been this nagging dissatisfaction with that, a sense of wanting to give in more meaningful ways to society and, always kind of looking for the compromise that helps me continue to go to work every day and do what I do. There have been a lot of very good things that have come out of that and a lot of very good reasons to do it. But there came a point connected to my transition, actually, where I looked around and I said, okay, I've got a better handle than I've ever had on who I am and who I want to be in the world. And then I turned my sights to, how am I spending my days? And does that feel as integrated as the rest of me is starting to feel? And that caused me to start really looking at it and saying, this could be a really meaningful, viable second career for me that would give back, that would allow me to participate in advocacy. I was looking for a way to do that. I've been thinking a lot about advocacy lately and coming down to, this is what the fight looks like for me, is to move into this field and work within and on behalf of my community.
Can you help position this episode by describing your grad school setup, what kind of a degree license that you're going for here too?
I am in the Master's in Clinical Mental Health Counseling program at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I attend their online campus. So that's right now allowing me to continue to do my day job while also effectively a full-time student, which is interesting. It's not what I thought it was. And in that, online training is something that is new to me. The last time I was in a formal degree program, we all gathered in classrooms, and things like discussion posts and responses and the occasional virtual session has really been an adjustment for me. I think some of it's generational, but some of it's just experiential.
So, what were your expectations when you decided to go back to school, and how has your experience compared to what you were expecting?
It's really interesting because I knew I was going to be online. And yet, somewhere in my head, I had this picture of gathering around tables with classmates and knew that we could accomplish that virtually. So I thought there would be more virtual time, virtual synchronous time, where we were in a space together, exchanging ideas. There's been a lot more writing, which is no problem. I like doing that. But I've had to learn academic writing because my two previous degrees were in English literature, where, you know, if you cited a source, it was usually because somebody said it better than you could, and they were supporting your argument. That was undergrad. And then I got an MBA, and we didn't do academic writing in my MBA course. I would say academic writing was one adjustment, and the adjustment to what is primarily an asynchronous learning format. Those have been the big adjustments because in my head, I still had the idea of what I had experienced before, which was virtually or otherwise gathering around a table and actively exchanging ideas in the moment. I just actually came off a weekend, a 3-day intensive weekend at the Chicago school. So I got that itch scratched, which was really, really nice, and was able to make some of those connections that I felt I really wanted, but hadn't yet had a chance to experience. So there's an element of it. But again, somewhere in my head, despite knowing that I was going into the online campus, I still was just like, when do we get to be together? When do we get to sort of debate and discuss in a room with each other? So there's not as much of that as I thought there was going to be. But like I say, it was just an adjustment of expectations.
What year are you in? Where are you in your program?
I'm just wrapping up my first year. So December 8th, I'll be through my first year, and I will rest for 4 weeks because a lot.
In addition to kind of the expectations about being in person or exchanging ideas, what were your expectations about the content that you would have been learning in your first year?
My expectations were first off that we would be working a lot with multiculturalism and social justice. And that absolutely has been the case, which has been very, very gratifying. And I would say learning about theoretical orientations was something I expected I would do. Again, I didn't come into this with anything more than a Psych 101 class in undergrad many, many years ago. There's some catching up that I have to do that some of my peers don't, because they're coming in either with that degree or with direct experience in clinics in one way or another. And so I'm coming in trying to catch up on some of those things. So getting a good grounding in theory, ethics, those kinds of things. The curriculum has made a lot of sense to me and has really helped guide me along. And I feel like it's allowed me to catch up on some of those core fundamental ideas that I just never had exposure to before. But the social justice piece for me, I remember being on a plane just for a vacation, and it was right when it was weird timing that my first term started, and 2 days later I got on a plane because we had already planned this vacation before I knew what the class schedule was going to be. And so I'm working on my first sort of reading and my first discussion post on the plane. But it was an ethics course. And so I was looking at the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics, and I'm reading, like, it was so encouraging for me because in my corporate roles in the past, I've worked in the HR space. I've had the opportunity to build out our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, the first one that our company had. It's been a joy to do that work, but it's also been very challenging at times. And there's always been this sort of, how are we going to justify devoting resources in the corporate space? And that challenge is maybe more acute now than it's ever been in the last 20 years or so. But here I was reading a textbook that was saying, no, not only do you get to do this work that you've been so excited about, you're supposed to. And we expect you to be thinking in these ways. And that was really, really exciting, more than what I expected. And the fact that it was hitting me like 2 days in was really affirming.
As a second career, it sounds like some catching up to do because there's folks
Yes.
coming off their bachelor's with lots of courses and things under their belt. And there's also, I think, the lived experience and I'll call it wisdom
Mm.
that comes from having a whole other life before becoming a therapist.
Sure.
What would you say has been the impact of being a second career student?
I feel what you just said. I mean, there was, like I said, there was some catching up, but there is, I mean, most classes I've been in, I can look around the room and say, yeah, I'm the oldest person here, which isn't necessarily a thing. It's not a thing in a negative way. It comes up, as you alluded to, in terms of the lived experience and in terms of, I think, just things that I sometimes see people getting worked up about or stressed out about. And I'm a little easier on it just because perspective, I suppose. I do think there's an element of wisdom. I do think there's an element, if I may say so. I think there's an element of just, there's an element related to having done work on myself as a client. And that's been a surprise to me that not everybody that I'm in class with has done that work. And I'm not talking about the quality of inner work anybody's done. I'm saying literally have never been a client. And it's hard for me to imagine stepping into this without having some sense of what it looks and feels like. So I've got that going for me. And yeah, I mean, I've got decades of life behind me where I'm able to look and say, okay, things pass. And, the thing that feels really, really important and stressful. Now, my therapist still reminds me that B's get degrees. She has to do that because I can still be uptight about my grades sometimes. But I do try to keep that sort of even keeled emotional intelligence in the classroom setting. I've been able to bring that in the practice sessions that we're doing more of now, which has been great. I'm getting people saying, how long have you been doing this? And I'm like, I haven't, but in my role as an HR professional, I've been coaching people for years. I've been doing things that I remember saying to a colleague at work just before I really dug in and researched and started to apply to schools. And I had said, there's always that line when you're coaching somebody in a professional setting where you have to be aware that you're about to go into like a light version of therapy. And you have to know where that point is that you're going to refer them to professional care with a licensed therapist. I said, because I don't have that training. I don't have that skill set. And this colleague of mine said, yet. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, I just have a feeling about you. And it was the very slight nudge that I needed. Go and
That's awesome.
make that leap. But I do think there are things like that I've been able to bring in that are benefits of my years, my experience, hopefully my maturity.
Not only does Therapy Notes offer everything you need to support your clients, they also offer outstanding customer service to their users. With 24/7 live customer support, assistance is never more than a phone call or email away, ensuring you have all the assistance you need to focus on what really matters most to you, your clients. Use promo code MODERN and try them free for 2 months today.
I'm trying to imagine an online school that teaches people how to be therapists in an asynchronous way and teaching people how to interact with people in this way. So I'm wondering, as you're doing the things that in our spaces where I was in person as an educator and as a student, we do a lot of role plays. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what that piece of your education looks like in an online school like this.
So we're getting into role plays. So the course I'm in at the moment is the first one where we're doing just a lot of role play, a lot of work around counseling skills. This course has 4 3-hour synchronous sessions where we work with each other. So that's all online, but we're at least live. And then I mentioned the 3-day intensive session that I just came back from. So those have been opportunities to do a lot of role play work. Prior to that, really had one video role play that I did with a peer, and that was around career counseling. So we've been slowly ramping into it. I don't know what year 2 is going to hold with regard to that. I expect we'll do more of it. I'm starting to understand the method to the madness in terms of how the courses are organized. And there was a lot of foundational work in the early part of this year to get to this point. I'm expecting that as I go into year 2, now that we're at this point, there'll be a lot more of the role play. And I anticipate it'll be done online via Zoom, synchronous format. Because to your point, I mean, they kind of put it out there that the discussion posts that we do most weeks are supposed to be like that. They're really not. I mean, you
Especially
write
for
this thing that feels like a short paper, and then people jump in. And the only time I've really felt like there was learning going on about how to connect with people was because somebody said something really out of line. And it's about how am I going to respond to this situation? The 2 times it's happened to me, it's usually been about my transition, where it's like, yeah, I invite pretty much everything when it comes to questions, but you just went there. So let me think about how I'm going to respond to this. And to some extent, demonstrate what an emotionally intelligent response would look like.
It seems like, especially for those of us who did not grow up with this type of technology, that it would be not as conducive to our learning anyway.
I hit a point about halfway through this year where I was super frustrated. I was in a lifespan development class, really, really dense reading. And the notion that there were going to be 100 multiple choice questions coming out of really a dense 350 pages. I never learned how to study for a test like that. And I bombed the midterm. I was super frustrated. And I remember, reaching out to various resources, my professor, a student advisor that I have, and say, help me with this, because this right now feels like a glorified correspondence course. And I'm struggling with that. And part of what they did was say, well, just wait for residency because it's going to feel more like a class. And it did. And that was fine. But there was a lot of it too, where I went to my counselor and said, because I recognized that part of it was for all of her saying B's get degrees, I was still really, really fixated on those grades and how do I demonstrate what I can do? And so, there are personal things that I'm continuing to work on that are related to my education. And it's been good to have my counselor as a resource for that.
As you're looking at the next phases of practicums and internships and those kinds of more practical experiences of your education, during the pre-interview, you were telling me that this means a pretty drastic shift to your life, where you're located. And could you talk about what your process is like around that, how you're going about your decision making as far as what you're looking to do?
So one of the things I know I want to do is I want to work with the LGBTQ community. I know that I want to, as part of that, work with older adults within the community. Not exclusively, but I want to be able to do that work. So I've got an idea of where I want to go. When I'm thinking about practicum and field work, it's been very much on my mind, like, what experience do I want to get that might be different than and might bolster the breadth of my experience as I go into my work after licensure. So one of the things, Katie, that I've heard you talk about before on the podcast is your work in community agency settings. And I've not done that before. Based on everything I've heard and everything I've read, I've gathered it's hard work. And it feels like it could be really valuable work to do, rather than, as an example, going to somebody who I know who is trans and has set up a private practice of trans counselors working with trans clients. That might be a thing I want to do. It actually sounds like it would be a really great thing to be able to do once I'm licensed. But I don't know that I necessarily want to jump there for field work. So I'm going through a lot of those kinds of mental gymnastics, trying to research and think about what's going to be the right path that's going to set me up for success in this new career. Yeah, so it's been a lot of those kinds of thoughts. There is a marketability element that has me the slightest bit concerned, I guess is what I want to say, but it's less and less of a concern and just more of a consideration, I suppose. And it's one of the things that has me interested in being in a community setting for my field work, is being in a space where we don't get to choose each other. And I realize that's probably got great things and not so great things. But one of the things that I have some concern with is that person who walks in and either saw a picture of me on a website and didn't realize I was trans, or like, does somebody come in and they're a one and done because as soon as I open my mouth and start talking, they're like, oh, this is not what I thought. This is not who I want to work with. In the community, I think I'll be fine. And specifically, if it's a practice that's working with trans clients, I know there's some good research that's coming out in the last few years that says, they're validating the positive outcomes of trans clients being able to work with trans counselors in terms of being able to see somebody thriving and all that sort of thing. I want to be a part of that at a point, but I'm also aware, practically speaking, I need to get a certain number of hours, and I don't want to put that at risk. So there are all these sort of like quasi-marketing considerations that are in my head as I think about that. And I guess I'll pick up on the phrase "in my head." I'm in my head about it. And I really need to get out of my head and talk to some more people. And now that I'm through year one, that's what I'll be jumping into in January and beyond, to really start to assess what of the considerations that are in my head right now are real, and really need to be things I'm worried about. And what are things that, just because I don't know, I'm maybe jumping at shadows.
When you hire Buying Time, you get an entire team of accountable, knowledgeable virtual assistants with different specialties. It's a pretty amazing one-stop shop for your business needs. And I should know, I've been a happy customer of Buying Time since 2015. Buying Time has helped me and other therapists with admin and client customer service, finances and bookkeeping, including sending out invoices and super bills, setting up automated systems to take care of clients during onboarding, marketing, websites, social media, blogs, newsletters, and a whole lot more.
Buying Time believes in streamlining efficiency and being cost effective, so they help you to regularly evaluate systems to make sure you're not paying for programs and platforms you don't need. And they put together a free systems inventory checklist to help all of us to uncover hidden expenses and optimize spending in your practice. Go to buyingtimellc.com/MTSG to get your free checklist now.
When you're talking about your experience in grad school and then this marketing concern as you move forward, the thing that comes to mind is safety. It sounds like you've already had colleagues who have approached you inappropriately, and potentially you might have situations where the one and done clients, right? Or those types of things, or potentially employers who are concerned about it and don't give you an opportunity.
Yep.
And so broadly, I guess my question is, how is the concept of safety impacting your decision making as you move through the profession?
That's a great question. I would say it's a question that I've been taking head on. Last term, I had a multicultural counseling course, and there was a point where one of our discussion posts, it was about people from marginalized religious communities. And I brought up the fact, I'm like, look, right now, given where things are in the world, I have a bias that I need to acknowledge against religious conservatives. And it isn't that I don't want to work with them, and it isn't that I couldn't work with them, but I absolutely am approaching somebody if they let on to me that they're coming from a conservative religious bent. I'm wary about what that might mean for my safety, either emotionally and psychologically, or potentially physically. And so some of the work I've been doing and things I've been discussing with peers in my classes and with my professors is, okay, so where is the line in terms of, I know ethically, you don't just, turn and refer immediately, but where's that line? Where does it become an unsafe situation? And I do want to have a plan for what happens if it's starting to feel physically unsafe. In particular, I think if it's more emotional, psychological, then that's where I need to decide when to invoke a referral type of process down the line. It was a question I was able to ask a few people about when I went to the SAIGE conference, and I apologize because I am not going to be able to rattle off the full name of that acronym, but it is the LGBTQ IA plus division within the American Counseling Association. So I went to their annual conference in October, and it was a good opportunity to talk to some folks who are practicing as trans counselors, and just kind of say, what does this look like? Is this a thing that needs to be front of mind for me? And some of them said, yeah, and the line is, you don't take any of it. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's a really interesting space, and I'm trying to learn more about it, talk to more people about it, and get to a place where I know that my safety will be secured. And I also need to keep in mind that if I find that right place to do work, that right employer, it's not just on me to do that. That right employer is going to be an employer that is supporting me in that development of a safety plan and in knowing, how we handle these kinds of situations.
In your education so far, how is the current world being discussed in curriculum? You're talking very wonderfully about trans issues and how that might look in the therapy world. I guess expanding beyond that, how are things like the job market and the way that technology and artificial intelligence are being incorporated into our field? Is that stuff that's coming up in your education?
Let me take those bit by bit. So the job market has come up in some of our assignments. Like, go and look at what the job market looks like, look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data and that sort of thing. I'd call that pretty cursory because it's at a pretty high level. It's looking at what a therapist make in Chicago. Okay. We aren't digging in at this point. I think it's really left to the individual to dig into what does the market and the demand for counselors focusing on older adults in the LGBTQIA community look like. That's more on me to get to that level of depth. I think generally the spirit of what I hear is, oh, you're going to be fine. There's such a demand. There'll always be a demand for this, that, or the other. And especially with some of the groups I want to work with, I feel like as soon as I say that's who I want to work with, I get some version of, oh, you'll never go hungry. Which is fine. A little dismissive, but
Sure.
it means I'm going to have to dig into it a bit more to really assess what it is that I'm looking at. And what type of practice or community agency or whatever it might be is that's going to serve both me and those clients best. The technology piece is really interesting to me because that's actually a big part of what I do in my day job right now. I'm the vice president of HR innovation for a manufacturing company. And so my days are spent looking at how we can better apply technology, including AI. So I'm tinkering with AI all the time. And really, when I'm thinking of discussion posts, because that's where it's come up. But those are where I was kind of bagging on discussion posts a little bit ago. What's great about them is they give me an opportunity to bring up topics that aren't necessarily part of the syllabus. And there was a question about technology. Most people ended up posting about things like electronic medical record keeping and such. But I really went there with AI because it's like, let's talk about this because it is real and it is here in some ways. I know you've had several episodes about it. And, but I mean, even with this counseling skills practice that I'm doing in the course I'm currently in, I fired up ChatGPT and said, hey, I'd like to practice reflections of meaning. And they're like, okay, here's the scenario. Would you like to practice? And that took about 3 seconds. And, something like that, I'm not worried about the ethics of it in terms of being a real client, but it was literally, I put on the voice feature, said the words, and little bubbles popped up. And 3 seconds later, it had come up with a scenario. It was ready to play the client in the scenario and will evaluate me on what that particular skill I'm practicing. And so I've been kind of within my classes being an advocate for, hey, we could use this. We have to obviously be very, very careful and we need to be mindful about how's it being used and how attractive could that be to insurance companies and other interests to, not be paying therapists to do the work that AI could do. I mean, all of those issues are real issues. I'm dipping a toe into it and trying to be a bit of a provocateur.
It's so interesting that you're the one that's needing to bring it up, though. I think that was the suspicion that Curt and I had, that schools aren't really ready for AI. Their curriculums don't include it. And so I'm excited that you're doing that, Iris, because I think it's needed, and hopefully your grad program will take heed of what you're bringing up and maybe add it to the curriculum for other folks.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, when I look at the curriculum and the electives, I mean, telehealth is an elective for us.
It's an elective?
It's an elective. So, I think it's catching up, and most people I know are planning on taking telehealth as one of their electives, but it does speak to the need to embed it. One of the things my school does wonderfully is embedding multicultural counseling and social justice issues in every class, almost every assignment. Bringing the tech into it would be a really good next step.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover?
I don't think so right now. I think I really am. I'm excited and interested to see where the next year takes me. Because it's been a lot of growth in this first year for me. And some of it, like I said, has been practical. It's just learning how to learn in this structure, going back to school again at this point in my life. But there's a lot of it that is, like I said, I didn't have this background. So getting the foundation and now getting to role play and practice, the word affirming keeps coming up in conversations with people. It reaffirms that this is the right path for me. and I can see myself doing the work, which I'm super excited about. I think the only other thing is that I'll mention that I've been giving a lot of thought to additional training down the line. So things like once I'm in field work and I can no longer do my day job because of the hourly demands there, it's going to free up some time. So I'm thinking about things like certification as a sex therapist, because similar to technology, human sexuality is an elective course. It's a 7-week course. And if I'm going to be working with clients in a community who in part define themselves by their sexuality and their sexual diversity, I just feel like more than 7 weeks would be a really good thing to have. And again, I look at my counselor, who was in many ways an inspiration for me to think about doing this. That's a background that she has. And so we've had a chance to talk a lot about that. The other area that I want to dig into is religious trauma. For the same reason. I know it's rife in the LGBTQIA plus community. And so being prepared to work with trauma generally, but religious trauma specifically, feels very important to me.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us this morning and sharing your experience. And I really look forward to checking in with you in a year and seeing where you're at and how things are changing. And for anybody who's listening to this, please follow us on our social media, join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on with these conversations. And until next time, I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy and Iris Wilson-Farley.
Thanks again to our partner Therapy Notes, the highest rated software for mental health professionals. Don't forget to use promo code MODERN for 2 free months and make the switch today.
Buying Time is a full-service virtual support agency that is standing by to support you in your practice. It's time for you to get out of the day-to-day and bring in someone you can trust that has the experience to help you with all your business needs.
And don't forget to go to buyingtimellc.com/MTSG for your free systems inventory checklist. Get on the path to less expenses and more profit.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.